we're standing in front of our Arts of Global Africa, and ultimately this is a gallery that for a lot of our school groups they see quite frequently. Yes. Oh, you copy? Okay. In your copy, you're going to have sort of like an overarching view of how to approach a tour in the space, right? So basically, essential understandings, what your customers or the patrons of the museum should walk away with, right? At the end of your tour, overall general consensus of what pieces are in here. So like what does our collection actually house? So we have items that are ritual, ceremonial, daily use. You saw a lot of daily use items in our Ancient Med Gallery, as well as ritual and ceremonial, popular urban, and fine arts. Now, popular urban is in there because what the curators wanted to do, even with the name change. So our Africa exhibit, if you've been with the museum for a while, was not titled Arts of Global Africa. It had a totally different name prior to. And when the curators redesigned the space and it was moving to the first floor, they wanted to approach it with the mindset of Africa isn't something that just sits in the past, right? So one of the issues we kept running into, like with our Native America gallery, along with the Africa gallery before the redesign of the museum, was that both of those galleries focused or highlighted on a lot of things that were centered around the past. And so that was sort of creating this misconception that Africans as well as Native Americans don't have anything relevant to offer now. So they were very mindful in the redesign of this by introducing more contemporary pieces. So that idea of popular urban or fine arts is added in this collection of things that we house, because not everything in here is ceremonial, not everything references or harkens back to ceremonial, and not everything is used for everyday purposes, all right? So we're going to start off in the gallery space. So follow me. We're going to stop right front. Now, in giving a tour, one of the things I love to tell new educators, or when I'm doing an educator professional development for educators, is that the tour is not about you, all right? So one misconception, especially a lot of museum docents, a lot of museum educators also fall into, or trap they fall into, thinking that the tour is about them. It's not about you. You are there to sort of edutain your audience. It's about what they gather from it, their points of entry. There are going to be multiple points of entry they're going to use to be able to identify with that piece, and you want to welcome that, because if you make it so academic, you lose them, right? You want to sort of introduce a snippet of academics, but then keep it fun and exciting, because ultimately your tour can't be all education, right? Education is fine. They're going to go do more research on their own, but you want to just leave them like golden nuggets that they'll follow. So it's like, you know what, I didn't know that. And then give them a reason to want to come back. If you sit there and give them a full-out lecture, which Elise and Elise and Megan spoke to earlier, it's very important that you don't put your audience to sleep. So when we approach this, or when we walk through the gallery today, I'm going to kind of walk through with that perspective. I'm also going to be talking about things that are current in our popular pop culture as well, because this is, after all, Arts of Global Africa. So we want to speak to the relevancy of what that art is to this timeline that we currently live in. People have this idea or this preconception already that museums are boring, right? It's like nothing in there matters to me anyway. I don't even know why I'm here. My wife dragged me or my husband dragged me, right? So with that being said, you want to make it so that they, hold up. So they use things like from the museums or from history in movies. They use things from history and art museums in books or in novels or in other capacities. You mean to tell me diapers or the idea of a onesie came from a dress that men and women used to wear as children? So that idea, because again, a lot of people are unconnected with how something from the past connects to what we're looking at today. So jumping into this piece, I'm going to focus on two pieces because we really don't have time to go too deep, but I'm going to focus on two pieces, and I'm going to start with this piece here, and I'm going to approach it in a similar manner to Elise. As she said, me and Elise, we do this every single day. We're going to approach it from a school program tour. So ultimately, it's going to be a conversation. It's going to be a dialogue, a back and forth. So before I give you details about the piece, I want to know what you see and what are some of the things you observe in the sculptural work behind me. Just name me one detail.
The colors.
Okay, the colors.
The way she's standing.
The way she's standing.
on.
All right. So the colors, the way she's standing, anything else?
The style of dress.
The style of dress, the patterns. You were saying something? Or? The dress, so the style of dress, the patterns.
The movement.
And the movement. So the juxtaposition of the movement, right? The figure isn't just standing still on the rope, but the juxtaposition, like it's a forward motion. Yes.
But if you're on a tightrope, you wouldn't be wearing shoes.
So there's a detail that sort of doesn't sit well, right? If we're thinking about this being something that would be a functional piece or something this was actually happening in real life. Anything else we notice or observe? Anything else?
No head.
No head. The obvious thing, right? There's no head on this sculpture, right? So how does the figure even know where it's going or where it's walking, right? Now, unlike ancient man, did the head fall off? No, right. So the head didn't fall off. That was an intentional thing done by the artist, and we'll get into that, into why a little later. Anything else we notice?
What she's wearing under the dress.
What the undergarments, right? So that also plays a role because that sort of helps us to maybe timestamp when this sculpture, what the reference the sculpture is being pulled from. Anything else? Anything else we can see over there?
How is it on the tightrope?
Yeah, the balance. So now what you're noticing is we're also getting questions back. This is why this dialogue in the beginning matters. If you notice too, I'm also repeating back everything you're saying because acknowledging your audience matters, right? You got to make sure that they understand that they're heard. You got to make sure that they understand that they are the reason you're here. So acknowledging you all of your thoughts. It also, as an educator, makes me think about what you're saying, and I'm not just brushing past what you're saying, right? And that brings us back to the question. Now it's causing questions to bubble up, which as an educator, that's what you want, because then it's going to lead you to what you want to talk about, which is the piece ultimately in itself. So one of the questions we have that came up, how is this connected? How is it sitting or propped up like this? So we have one question. Any other thoughts or questions we might have about the piece?
She has hardly any flesh.
So she's very, very very slender. There's not a lot of extra flesh.
Skin
No, it's not showing much.
Skin
Oh, skin! Also, no visible skin. Got you. So no skin visible. There's little to no flesh visible. So question: why do you think? Well, since we're there, why do you think that was? Why did the artist go there? Because if we're in Arts of Global Africa, is this something we would traditionally think Africans would maybe wear?
No.
No,
Maybe not,
but
right?
the cloth looks so traditional, and the that's the question.
So,
That's the tension.
so we have this tension of, hold up, so the fabric makes me think Africa, right?
yeah.
But the style of clothing does not match traditional African garb. So now we have these again, like you said, this juxtaposition. What is this all about, right? Any other questions we can think about? Or comments and things that we see.
How does it stay balanced?
How does this stay balanced, right? So we can come back to my friend about construction. How is this thing propped? How does this thing stay balanced? Why is it like if I'm jumping up and down, why doesn't it shake, right? So how did the artist actually construct it? Anything else?
She's wearing a dress that is not appropriate for the thing that she's doing and holding a dress like as if she's.
So the style of dress would not, I mean, if you're going to walk on a tightrope, the last thing you may want to do is walk on it with a full-fledged dress with layers. Then you have one of the pants underneath along with the stockings. Might make you a little more uncomfortable, especially if you're already nervous and you're sweating, right? So with that being said, the clothing isn't conducive to the activity, right? So as you just saw, I gave you a large breath, right? I gave you a large breath to sort of think about what we're looking at. Make your own observations. I'm highlighting what it is that you see, and then I'm also allowing you the opportunity to give me questions so that I can then answer those questions. I'm going to talk about those things regardless, but you don't know that if you were just my viewing audience, right? So I want you to lead the conversation so that way you find the tour more interesting. It's much better than me saying, well, this piece was created by Yinka Shinabari. Yinka Shinabari was an artist from the, like, no one wants to, like, that makes the tour very dry, and then it's like I'm talking at you and we're not having that dialogue or that conversation. So now jumping into answering your questions, right? So talking about the questions as to why. So let's get into the clothing aspect of it, right? So we talked about the African style of the dress, or fabric print of the dress, but however, the style of the dress doesn't matter. Do we have any fashionistas in the group that can maybe tell me what cut or what style of dress might that best match to? If we were to make the top or make the whole dress black, what style of dress? Very Victorian, Downtown Abbey. So right away, if we were to just imagine in our minds, like, hold up, all black, that's the Victorian style dress. Ha, ding, ding, ding. So that's one thing. So we know the dress has a Victorian or a European flavor to it, right? Now, the print itself, let's get into the print and let's dissect that a little more. Now, we talk about popular pop culture, right? So there are a lot of things in popular pop culture that can help us assess the fabric itself. Now, we live in 2020, right? That's the timeline we live in, right? However, this artist, if they're already tapping or harkening back to the Victorian period, there may be some other layers of history embedded in this piece, right? So thinking about the print itself, we think traditionally African, right? So one point of reference we can maybe use is maybe think about the movies and the movie theaters and movies that are in the movie theater. Are there any movies that have been heavily influenced by Africa as of recently? Maybe in the past 5 or 6 years.
Black Panther.
Oh, you are so brilliant. Absolutely, yes. So Black Panther, the irony behind that movie is that it was thoroughly researched before it was put out there for the public to consume. The director wanted to be thoughtful in every aspect of that movie. So how many of us have seen Black Panther? Anybody seen Black Panther? So we have a few. All right. So this might be a great homework assignment for those who may not have, right? Because it gives you some insight to some traditional African garb. All right. So the costume director, who also won several Oscars, FYI, she goes all the way back to Spike Lee's movies and has done movies for Spike Lee, and also produced fashion for the Black Panther movie. Ruth Carter, she just won an Oscar for Black Panther. She made sure to do our diligent research in finding out what tribes would wear what fabrics. For those who saw Black Panther, do any of us recall seeing prints that looked exactly like this?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you don't think so, and some don't remember. All right. So with that being said, we did not. And there's a reason, right? So we think about the story of Black Panther is special because that space, or the Wakanda where the fictional characters live, was kept, for those who watched it, was kept what? Secret, isolated. No one knew, which means that it was uninterrupted by colonization. So everything in that bubble would be traditional what? Traditional African garb, right? The only fictional thing about Black Panther would be Wakanda. We know Wakanda doesn't exist, right? And so Wakanda, unfortunately, there's not a real place in Africa. And of course, there's no special guy with special powers who gets his powers from this special. That doesn't happen either. However, from the woman tribes, right? So the tribes, the all women tribes, their wardrobe, their costume, there were women tribes in Africa that were very similar to the women-led tribes here in North America and Native American tribes, and they were the matriarchs, right? That's accurate, even down to the clothing they wore, as well as the other characters we see in the film who are wearing traditional kente, right? They're wearing other traditional African fabrics. We don't find this fabric in Black Panther because this particular fabric was introduced to Africa through what? Through the Dutch and because of this, so through colonization, the Dutch was able to then introduce this fabric. So this artist is kind of doing a very layered thing here, right? Yeah. So it's Arts of Global Africa, right? We're in Global Africa. However, we have a Victorian style dress, a Dutch wax fabric, right, that is brought over, and that Dutch wax fabric is, in our current timeline, we would associate that to be traditional African garb. But that's only because we're so many years, removed from when that garb was first introduced. So it's almost like American culture. We think about country music, right? So country music is a big thing. That's an American staple. However, if you go to certain parts of Asia, country music is also just as equally popular, right? Just like hip hop, right? Hip hop is also American. That's where it started, that's where it originated. However, if you go to Asia, you find parts of Asia that is heavily saturated in hip hop, and you would think that it started in Asia. But over time, for those who may be growing up in those spaces, or even Americans who are growing up in this generation, they may not be clear on the original or the origin of those things because of the timeline that they were born in. So going back to the piece, so Yinka Shinabre was mindful in the style of dress. He also not only was mindful in the cut or the style of dress by harkening back to the Victorian age, he also made sure to use a print that we would associate with Africa, even though it's not traditional African garb. So bringing us back to the head, why headless? That was another thing you all brought up or highlighted.
No identity of the person.
No identity of the person.
Lack of self-determination.
Maybe lack of determination or self-determination. Any other thoughts on why the figure itself is headless?
And also the colonization, they didn't recognize.
So not being recognized, not being seen by the authoritative power that is now taking over the space. Any other thoughts?
Maybe because there's so many faces in the African diaspora that putting a specific one on would make you go towards that.
That's a strong point. So in Africa, Africa is huge, right? With large multiple ethnic groups that are represented within the space. And so by putting a face on, you take away from or negate another group of people that may have lived or that may represent or be represented by Africa. Any other thoughts of
Well,
why?
I think the whole idea of balance, in terms, it's almost like this figure is going into the unknown.
Okay.
Can't see where they're going.
Okay.
Not really appropriately dressed for where
their
they're
journey,
going.
yeah.
But yet and still walking through.
Okay, so that idea of pushing forward, even though there's that idea, I don't know what I'm walking into, I'm unsure what the journey might take me. I see 3 more hands, so I'm gonna just kind of go in a row.
Yeah, so, you say like balance,
Mm-hmm.
because if you look at it, it's kind of like the dress, the print, the colors are so bright.
Yeah.
But you'll see that person from
Far away,
At
yeah.
the same time, they're kind of invisible.
Okay, so this is about being visible, invisible, right? So the idea, the figure, you see me, but then you don't, right? What were you going to add on?
I was gonna say, if you see a face, you tend to go there first, and I don't think that was the point of the piece.
So all of the points you hit on are excellent. However, harkening back to the idea of if we had a face, that would be the first thing we'll be trying to look at, right? Figuring out who this person is. When that's really not what matters about the piece. It matters more so is what is this person doing? And
The balance of the arm, very ballet,
Mhm.
but the holding of the dress,
Uh-huh.
very Victorian dance pose,
Mhm.
1 foot up,
Mhm.
stepping forward, like my colleagues, friends have said.
yeah. Move so I saw one more hand in the back, wasn't it? One more hand? Yeah.
But the figure is balanced without a head. How do you balance without your head?
That's
It's on the leg, and you can, the whole torso is moving as though it still has the head.
great point. So you have this figure here that's headless, however, it's still jetting forward. And we know, of course, we all know when we think about balance, right? Our head is the heaviest part of our body, right? So that head, even though we might not be aware of how much balance our heads bring to us, for those science people in the room. So that's another great thing. Again, we're talking about multiple galleries. We have multiple galleries that connect that back. Makerspace is one of those spaces.
What I'm getting from this is like life
Uh-huh.
is a balancing act. And
Okay.
here we are, and I'm forced to wear the garb of
Mhm.
colonization, but
Mhm.
yet I'm able to put my own stamp on it with
Ah,
the colors.
yeah.
But yet it's just balancing everything to try to get by.
Okay, all right. I like how you approach that. Now I want to hear you, and then I'm gonna kind of bring it home. Yeah.
I see it as representing the past and the future.
Past, okay.
Past of how the history of Black, African
Mhm.
American, westernized by force,
Mhm.
missing head, but still try to go forward in that.
Despite that.
Despite that, with a hard situation.
Okay, all right. So okay. Maybe I could take 2 more, and then I'm gonna bring it on home. All right, because I want to hear what you have. You look like you have juicy stuff.
Maybe
So.
the reason there is no head
Uh-huh.
is because, piggybacking on what you said, that
Sure.
the head is heavy,
Yeah.
all of the past is in that.
That's
So
the
in
thought
terms of
system.
moving forward on this tightrope,
I like how
maybe you
y'all-
take off
I
that
should snap to
heavy,
that. Yeah,
heavy
yeah.
piece
Yeah.
and move forward without it.
Yeah, because you're right. A lot of times we're trapped in our own trappings, right? We were bullied as a kid, so we think everybody's always talking about us as an adult, right? So that's the thought process. What were you going to add on?
You know, the more I look at the patterns and the colors, I think of spirit. I think there's
okay.
in the reds and the yellows.
Yeah.
It's just something that it's very uplifting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of coming out and breathing out at you in spite of the colonialization, the lack of identity. And there's such grace
Yeah.
in this position also. Look at the hand.
Yeah.
It's just so, there's something very beautiful. And I think also the fact that they chose, or the artist chose to make this figure, like somebody said, like a ballet dancer.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
just something there about the spirit.
That is really, really, really. So this is one of my favorite pieces. So I like
Say it spirit. I'm gonna say it or am I gonna say it?
So Yinka is one of Yinka is one of my favorite artists, and this is not the only piece we have in our collection. If you've ever been to the Valentine House during the holiday time, you may have seen some of his other works, and you know it because of his trademark headless figure, right? So that's something he uses through it with a lot of his figures. However, there are sculptures where he does have heads on them. There's one cool one at the Brooklyn Museum where there's like this astronaut kid that's upside down. That was what looks like they're walking on the wall, or walking on the ceiling, I should say. So he's known for doing both, either with or without, but this is a trademark of his, having figures headless. Now, what if I told you everything you said is valid, and everything you said is accurate, especially when we talk about the history of the dress, we talk about the history of the fabric, and then picture this, the artist says, I don't have an interpretation. I created this so you all would have your own interpretation. That is exactly right. And then mic drop. That is what Yinka does with his pieces. So, of course, he's referencing history, right? He does it so well. He'll highlight something from history, negative and or positive, depending on your lens, and then he leaves it for the audience to interpret. This is what makes art so dynamic, because we all connected on it in our own way. Right. Art is so subjective that despite all of our many different backgrounds, we're all probably from different places across the globe. I know I'm from the South originally. So with that being said, like all of our different experiences we brought to this one moment, and we all were able to connect and be able to like relate to this one piece with our different experiences. And that's the ultimate goal of your gallery tour. That's the ultimate goal of the museum experience, and why people want to come back. They want to come back because they want to feel that connection. Now, oh, you understand where I'm coming from. You see it like I see it. Even though you might be a doctor, you might be scientist, right? You might be working something totally different, something totally abstract, but it doesn't matter. School teacher meets doctor, but you all come together on this one thought, on this one viewpoint. So again, really cool piece. Yinka is really big on like not having a written meaning out. Of course, on here it speaks about the Dutch wax fabric. It goes in that detail, but it really is no like harkening or detail about what the piece is about, because he leaves it open for interpretation. All right,
Daryl,
yes.
You told me, and you didn't mention it, but some African tribes believe that the soul
Yes,
resides
you're right.
in the head.
Yeah.
So that could be part of it. And then the other part, what about Yinka himself?
Yeah. Yinka is disabled. That's another.
He's a quadriplegic.
And he's
in a wheelchair, and
yeah.
he can't move from the neck down.
Yeah. What? And the interesting thing is, so
how does he do it? How does he do it? How do you think? How does he do it?
With a computer?
How does he do it? How does he conceptualizes this whole thing, right? Everything. And I'm only saying this because he taught me everything.
She's right.
He conceptualizes all of this. The patterns on there, very specific. These ladies were pointing out light bulbs and electric sockets. And that's to make you think about the different Western influences that Africa and the countries of Africa have experienced. Are there electric in all countries of Africa? Is this something that they have, right? But how does he do this?
Does he do it like Stephen Hawking?
How else could he do it? What does this need to be functional? It needs you, right? So he needs a community of people. So that's another wonderful tie-in.
The working together. Now, construction, you did have questions about how it was put together. So I feel I need to let you all know that. So that's the sort of the aha. So the rope itself is actually made out of, the rope, I should say, there's twine wrapped over top of an iron bar, right? So there's an iron bar that runs across, and then there's an iron rod that runs through the foot of the figure, and it sort of works as the armature for the sculpture itself, and it's welded to the iron rod that's at the bottom. So it creates that perfect balance. I sometimes like to mess with my mathematicians who are really like, there's a way to do this mathematically. However, I don't know how to do that, but there is a way to do this mathematically. It's almost like, so what, if I was writing the equation for this, how would this look? And they always look at me like, so, but there is a way to do the balance this mathematically with the weight and everything, but no, this is iron and iron forged together, and then the armature is put over top.
So he has, the artist has a group.
A team, yeah. So think of it kind of like Kende Wale. So Kende Wale is another prominent African American. Well, is Kende Wale from? He's
African.
Artist. And so with that being said, he has a team that paints his paintings now. These massive paintings. Even though he is fully healthy and fully functional, he still conceptualizes it. And so when you get to a certain level as an artist, I'm not there yet.
Like when
Nobody's
you're a
making
chef,
my artwork for me, or a chef
Like when you're
there.
a chef,
So when you get to a
painting
certain
chef.
level, you no longer are the one actually doing the work. You conceptualize it, and then you pay or charge someone to do it.
So Wynwood Walls in Miami, Florida, the best artists come with 20 people.
Yeah.
They conceptualize it
Yeah.
and they draw, but there's one wall that the artist did all by himself with spray cans.
Oh, wow.
The way that people used to do street
Yeah.
art. But it's the same thing, the community that
Yeah.
they put together
Yeah.
to do their well-constructed art.
Yeah, and there's something to be said when you can look at a piece of work and say, you know, I have something to do with that. Our high school interns, we have an internship program for those who may have nieces, nephews, or children who would like to work here at the museum. But we have a high school internship program, and they actually construct or make mini installation for the museum. So that's something that they get to do as a part of their 4-year program being in the museum. And that's something cool to say, like, I had a hand in creating this piece of work that sits in the museum that all people are able to see and able to benefit from. So I don't want to stay here too long because I want to make sure that we get to the other second piece. But as you walk through, so in this package you have, not only do you have, as I highlighted, the first page, but once you get past that, you also have a section here for questions to ask, right? So that's always one thing. What do I ask, right? So I gave you general questions that you could ask about the space and why, you know, these things matter, right? And in case you're an educator and you have like one of those, I call them brain farts, I have no other word for it. But you have a brain fart moment and you don't know what to talk about because you did all this research, you came prepared, then you get there and all of it goes out of your brain. So it's like, oh, what do I do? Refer to your questions. You can refer to your questions, and as you talk, I guarantee you it's happened to every educator, especially for my retired educators that might be in the room. You can speak to this as well. You've been in front of your class or you've been in front of your group and bloop, it just goes away. But going back to your VTS, which is kind of what I did there, that visual thinking strategy, what do you see? What are some of the things we observe? That gives you a breath to sort of collect yourself. Take in a deep breath, and then they start to create the questions for you. And then you have your trusty, you put this on a little index card and keep it in your back pocket. And that way, if you ever are stumped, just pull the questions out, and you'll be able to speak to the questions directly, all right? Now, on the other side of that sheet, you have this nifty little thing, which you probably also got in your Ancient Med packet, but top 10 list. So this is basically like a top 10 list of facts about our Africa galleries, about our collection itself. It also breaks down a couple of pieces like Man with Bicycle, which is that piece there, the apron here. It also talks about the Efa headdress, which we're about to talk about in a couple of seconds, and a few other pieces that are normally on display in this gallery. They do rotate out items as within the museum. However, at least one or more of these items will still be on display even as they rotate them out. They typically rotate out more so the contemporary pieces because of the materials that are used. They need to rotate those out more frequently. So we're going to make our way through, and we're going to come to the middle here. So we went from something very contemporary to something that's a little more ceremonial, something that would have an actual function, something that's not just there for aesthetics, right? So we're going to just kind of circle up around this piece here. What I also did, well, I'll get to that at the end. We'll finish this and then I'll walk you over there and give you that last little tidbit. So jumping into the piece in the middle, right? You approach it in the same manner, right? Because again, remember, your tour is never about you. It's always about your audience. So you want to find out what they want to talk about, what they want to explore. So what are some of the things we observe? What are some of the things we see? So you said we see some big, I missed that back.
It's a big piece.
It's a big piece in general, a huge piece, right? What else?
Seems to be resting on a head.
So it's resting on the head. You're highlighting mother, children. So there's some type of idea of family, right? Or some type of idea of community. Any other things we see? So there's a rider. There's a rider that's sitting on what? Do you see? How do you know he's riding?
Plus, is a horse or a donkey?
A horse. So we have this horse, and there's this figure like riding on top of this horse. What were you saying or highlighting?
That was what I was saying.
Oh, same.
But there's a child, it looks like a child.
So there's like a child or a kid in the front part of the harness that's in front of the larger figure in the middle. And feel free to walk around it so you can really get into all the details. The position. So we have, musicians, I'm sorry. So there's not only family here, but we have people who are also holding musical instruments. Anything else?
I'm getting the Easter Island vibe. You know those big heads on Easter Island?
Yeah, definitely. So there's some referencing to other cultures, other places, yes?
The headpiece has somebody wearing a headpiece.
So the headpiece has somebody wearing the headpiece, all right? So right away, we already know that this is a mask, sounds like. So we've already deciphered that this is a mask, which means that this is something that would be worn. If you were not aware, if you look in the front, you can see there's little 2 peepholes right there for the eyes so that you could actually see, right? Moving forward. So a headdress with someone wearing a headdress for someone to wear, while we have a figure on the top wearing a headdress. Anything else? Anything else we observed? The levels, so there's multiple levels, so it's like a tiered system almost. Anything else we
They
observed?
got like 3 colors, right? There's red, there's green, there's black.
So there are like 3 colors in the state that it is now, going back to the idea when we talked about ancient man earlier. Initially, if we imagine how it looked in its original state, very bright, very colorful. But again, over time, the colors fade just like anything else, and this is what we're sort of left with. Anything else?
It looks so heavy.
It looks heavy. How much do you think it weighs? That is the question. How much do you think it weighs?
68 pounds.
68 pounds. Any other thoughts? Very specific. Any other thoughts? You say any other thoughts on
I would say 150.
150?
150, wow.
All right. So that's a thought. Someone is wearing this on their head, on shoulders, right? It's resting on their head. And we are gauging it to be somewhere between 68. We said 60 or 58? 68. And then 150, right? Somewhere between that. So the actual weight of this piece is 50 pounds.
Oh.
So 50 pounds, they seem so much heavier, right? But when we think about the material, so why would it be a little lighter? What is it made out of? Because I would imagine, right, wood. So because it's wood, yes. So the wood, because it's wood, it's a little lighter than if we were thinking like iron or we were thinking some type of metal or rock, right? So it's made out of wood. So the materials is why it's only 50 pounds. How do you think it's made? So we talked about materials. How do you think the artist creates this piece?
It looks like it's one piece.
Right, is it cut from?
Oh, so brilliant. I can't get anything past you all, right? So you're absolutely correct. It is one piece of wood that the artist carves into and whittles out all of those figures and whittles out all of those characters. Again, even the art in making this mask is something where the artist is trained. It's not something you just dive into. So you have the artist that's trained to create the mask, but you also are the person that will perform with this mask on is also trained in how to wear it because they need to be able to balance the weight while they are walking in the procession, and in some cases they're actually dancing as well. So you have to be able to balance that weight, and they start them training off very young. So again, what else can we
What
find?
are the little, like, staples?
Stable. So those little latch work, right? So you have to think about going back to weight, right? And being able to actually put the mask on, right? So the idea of it being able to be placed on the head and being able to fit securely on that person's head, that's what you see the extra details for, all right? Any other thoughts? Any other questions or things we observe or see?
Well, the horse, the pony, the head, the animal is decorative, ceremonial headdress, right?
Yes.
It's got like a little thing going on.
And the guy holding both, whatever, the shelves or.
So yeah, so it's almost like it's almost like he's pulling these shells. You can see his hands on the inside there, sort of like holding both or bracing both of these sides together. So the figure in the middle, the central figure in the middle, is a warrior. He's would be sort of think of the commander in chief of that army, right? And this is actually considered a warrior mask, all right? So all the other people are people that would be associated when we think about going into battle, right? In some cases, when you think about battle, especially battles from, we think ancient Egypt or we think ancient Rome, you may have that in the beginning to sort of march ahead of the army troops processioning in, and then behind the little band you have the massive army, right? So the band is sort of announcing that the army has arrived, and then all of the soldiers are there ready to, go into battle. So again, that idea of the central figure, he's only as strong or only as durable as his team that surrounds him. So he can't accomplish the goals of being this strong warrior and winning the battle without his team assisting or aiding him.
So this is like a flag or an emblem? Or
So yeah, you have so they're like details that speak specifically to the particular tribe. Unfortunately, I'm not that knowledgeable about what specific tribe, and I don't want to give you misinformation, but this is again where you have to be honest with your audience. If there is a question like that comes up, and say, you know what, let's delve into that deeper maybe at a later time, or you know what, we're going to be looking at 2 more pieces. If you want to quickly Google or research that for me while we go, we can delve more into that once you found it on your iPhone, because everybody has an iPhone or a cell phone now. Yeah.
I don't, what do they,
I'm sorry, excuse me. You mentioned that the person that would have been carrying this headdress was trained.
Yeah, so think of it almost as if you were a dancer being taught modern dance or ballet. You don't start off with tendus and relevés. You start off with your basic first position, second position, third. Yeah. So with that being said, it's like you start off little steps, right? And then as you work your way up, so the mask itself would not be this initial 50-pound mask. It would have started off as a lad or a kid. They would have started off with maybe like a 5-pound, 10-pound mask, and then building up their endurance, kind of like a football player or any other athletic person, you build up your tolerance.
So this person was a very important person in
They would, I mean, being pre-selected, you would have been sure. I mean, there is some sense of importance to that. However, it's more about this. It's really not about the person wearing a mask, but more about the community that it would be attached to. Because again, it's the idea of community and the idea of fellowship. So while they would have been an important or integral part, it's really about, again, the community and how that role in the community.
Was this
I want to know where they keep this and what they did with it. They weren't wearing it.
That's a great question. So from my understanding, they would have been housed in a special space, and then it would have been brought back out for the ceremony as they redo the ceremony later on, following the next year. There was another question.
I thought, was this made for a specific person, like so each warrior had this piece or something? There's like wife and kids.
So yeah, so that part I'm unsure about, because there are multiple people wearing multiple masks during the ceremony. So I'm not sure like if the masks are specific to that individual or to that is their general blood or army, like was it their father? I'm not sure. But yes, there are multiple masks that are created, and there are multiple masks that are worn during the ceremony. So again, and that's where it goes, it harkens back to that idea of community and why one individual isn't more important than the others, because there would have been multiple individuals wearing the same mask. So really, really cool piece. This is a piece we do with our early learners. Our early learners really get into this, especially, you think about the preschoolers and our 2nd and 3rd graders, because it's something they can identify with. And you can approach this from multiple angles. You have the idea of community. You have the idea of how a community is set up, people that are there to protect you, people that are there to educate you, because you see people holding books in this space as well as people that are there to play music. All of these things are parts that speak to our rich communities and how diverse our communities are. So right away, even for the little ones, they're able to take something away, because their point of entry is going to be what they know, right? So they're not going to be as knowledgeable as we are. However, they know what a policeman is, they know what a teacher is, they know what a musician is, and they're able to pull those things right away when they look at this piece. Now, there are a lot of other cool pieces in this space, and we do get to those pieces when we're talking to our groups depending on the age demographic. I've done tours in this space as young as preschool, as old as I don't say as old, that sounds so horrible, but as old as my educators that come through. It is, all right? So I say that because I have a professional development tomorrow with teachers from Mount Clair. And college kids, we also work with college kids as well. But I say that to say that you can really do any one of these pieces with any age level. It really doesn't matter. Some people are like, that's too kiddie for grown-ups, but there's always something to learn, and there's always something to pull out. I want to highlight one last thing, and I'm not going to talk about it. I just want to show how it's important to sort of have this reference key in the back. So on the last sheet I gave you some Adinkra stamps, right? So these Adinkra emblems or Adinkra symbols, they all have different meanings, all right? And the reason I thought this is important to include in your packet is because so many of our pieces are connected specifically to Nigeria and specifically to the Yoruba people. And Adinkra stamping comes from Yoruba and the Nigerian people. So they have that overlap, even though each piece doesn't have that. when we look back at the crowns in the background, those crowns, especially the very brightly colored blue one, you'll see the Adinkra symbols on the sides, and you'll see, and right away, that should let you know, Nigeria, Yoruba, without even reading a label. So once you are able to recognize or identify some of these symbols, when you look at certain works, it'll become second nature, including the linguist staffs that we see here. There are symbols up here that are also very Nigerian, very Yoruba. And then what I want to take you is to one of our larger scale pieces, which is completely covered in Adinkra symbols. Again, contemporary. So something that is from the past, right? This Adinkra stamping is a tradition that has been with the Yoruba people forever, right? We see it in this very modern work, right? This is a very modern, very contemporary work. It's a beautiful piece, but it's something to think about that each one of these symbols has a different meaning, right? And that meaning houses a lot of power, because we think about symbols for us in America, and we think about the American flag and the power that that holds. We think about our men and women who fight in our military, and when they get those certain ranks, like I'm from a military family, the power and the energy that those symbols and those rankings hold, right? So again, thinking about how symbol and symbolism can be very specific to a culture and hold a lot of power and a lot of strength, and then seeing how contemporary artists, modern artists from today, and take that knowledge of their past and infuse it with very contemporary themes. So a really, really cool piece. If you notice, there are 3 figures here. Just highlighting the 3 figures. You have a gentleman here. You also have a gentleman here in the middle, and then there's a gentleman there in the back that's sort of kind of cut off at the top. And again, that idea we talk about nudity. Again, kids do notice that the figures are new. I love what you spoke to over there. I'm probably going to use that as well when I move when I do my school programs. But again, it's you have to address it if it becomes a topic. If it doesn't, then you just scale past it. But it's good to address it if you do need to address it. But there's so many cool things in this space. Very modern contemporary pieces hanging right above our head. I love that one. There's so much I could talk about, but I'm running out of time. And I know Megan's like, okay, Daryl, let's wrap this up. So,
Adinkra, can you spell that, please?
Adinkra, yes, I believe it's A-D-I-N-K. Thank you. And I was about to check the label just to make sure. You saw me digging in my head like, oh God, this is where I go wrong. So thank you so much for that. Now, is there any other questions, or anybody have any input that they would like to add?
This was fabulous.
Oh,
Yeah, you're right.
I'm so glad you enjoyed. I enjoyed you all. You all were. So one thing, and this may happen to you. You may be doing your best tour, and that group gives you nothing, right? And that's okay. Don't lose your momentum. Don't get discouraged. Some groups are just not chatty. Some groups are just going to be like,
Type 4. Those type 4 people.
Yeah,
Type 4 what? Yeah.
Exactly. So if that happens, right? Don't close up. I don't want you to ever close up and think it's something you did, because as educators, you know, we all like the validation of our groups walking away with smiles on their faces. And if our group walks away kind of like, and they were like this through the whole tour, you don't know whether it was good or bad. And I know that validation does matter, but I don't ever want you to get discouraged, because as a fellow educator, it matters to hear that response back that you all loved it, and I'm glad you all loved it, but also prepare yourselves for those audiences that are just going to give you nothing. And that may or may happen. May or may not happen. It depends. All right?
Fingers crossed it doesn't.
I pray it doesn't, yeah. I think in this museum, I've been here now for almost 8 years, about to go in my 9th year. So I've been here for like 8 or 9 years, roughly, and I think I've had that happen maybe twice. Where I was like, and surprisingly, one group was a teenage group, and then the other group was an older group. So it was like, I don't know if it wasn't, you don't know, you can't gauge it or you can't call it. But again, just be prepared and just never get discouraged, all right? All right, you all were awesome.
Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you.
This is why me and Elise, we love the tag team of tour together.
You do.
Thank you, Alicia. One more time for us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It was really my pleasure.
And this isn't the last time we're going to hear from them, because later on in the trainings, we've got a couple other sessions where we'll be calling
And
on
we're a
them.
resource for you
Yes.
too. So our office is right near Megan's. We're in the suite right after. You're welcome to come up if you need resources, ideas, you have questions. Just want to say hi.
And feel free to say hi. And one of the things I would be remiss if I did not highlight, we have a lot of cool public programs. So if you're going to be working with us, we encourage you, even if you just want to volunteer, you don't want to like turn up with us, Volunteering, we always need the extra hands. Megan is one of our public managers, but Stephen is our other public programs manager, and I work with him quite closely. And we have the upcoming March 26th. We have our Art After Dark series, so that starts March 26th. Essentially, it's a welcoming of the community to come hang out with us. We'll have refreshments, our cocktails, food, beverage, and the cool thing about the one happening on March 26th is called the Body Electric. So we're going to be bringing in DJs. So there'll be 3 DJs, and we'll be doing what's called a silent disco. So you have your earphones on, and no one knows what DJ you're listening to. You can choose what DJ you want, right? So if you're dancing on beat, no one knows because they don't know who you're dancing to. So with that being said, it's a great space for all ages. Our last big event, our last Art After Dark, was celebrating the life and legacy of Jerry Gang.
Y'all remember that when we got out of training and the party was pumping?
So that's what we expect. And you'll see it was a wide array of demographics, a wide array of different people from the community. So I don't want you to ever feel like, well, I don't know if that's for me. Everything
And
here
if you
is
go
for
to
you.
it, too,
Yes.
if you go to the public program too, then when you're on a tour, people are like, what else can I do? What other stuff do you all offer? Now you can speak to it because you've been to one. So you can be like, oh, well, depending on who they are, what they're interested in, you can say, you should come to Art After Dark, or you should come to our lecture series, or you should come to our
Pop-up
films,
poetry.
or pop-up poetry.
Yeah.
So coming to it, the description that you read and like the image online is always different than actually being there.
Quick question, I know that you said that we're going to have shadow opportunities.
Yes.
Can I shadow you?
Actually, we were
Well, and
just
that's what
talking about that.
I was going to say,
We
Megan
wanna
and I,
offer
we've
an
been talking
opportunity.
about it,
Mhm.
so hopefully you can join us on one of the
Because even though
school
they're
tours, just so
doing
you
school-
can see the difference.
And the dynamics of how different it is.
Yeah, because like they both said, like it's just because they're doing it for students and kids, that does not mean that technique does not work with all ages, because it absolutely does.
And
So I
then
think
you
we'll see
also,
that.
I didn't mean to cut you, but
No,
then
go
you also get to see the different techniques we do. So we didn't explore all those techniques. We have in-gallery activities that we do that you can do with your groups if they become, so if you get that group to, right, then let's change it up. Let's do conversations in art. Let's do blind drawing or soundscape, right? So these are activities we do in the gallery that force them to have to participate. And you, like with the blind drawing activity, essentially you're partnering up the group with the partner, and they're being escorted into a gallery. One person can see the artwork, one person can't. And then that person that can see the artwork has to sketch or draw what the person is seeing, and they can only use their words. So now you're like, I'm not even going to work. They're going to do the work, right? But in doing the work, right, they get to get a deeper look at the work, because now they have to pay attention to the details, and it forces them to loosen up a little bit and like get that dialogue flowing. So there's so many cool things you'll get to see if you do get the shout.
I think what we'll try